a homeless man transforms into an Arab billionaire, executive, and then does this to his ungrateful African wife. Imagine a man who had nothing, sleeping on the cold streets, invisible to the world. One day, a twist of fate transforms his life, catapulting him from poverty to unimaginable wealth. But when the woman he loved, who once stood by him, turns her back on his newfound success, his next move leaves everyone stunned. What he does will shock you and reveal the true meaning of power, resilience, and justice. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring you more inspiring and jaw-dropping tales like this one. Ethan Carter was a man who had seen the worst of life. Born in a struggling neighborhood in Detroit, he had once dreamed of success, dreams that were crushed when a series of bad decisions and unfortunate events left him homeless at 28. The cold nights on the streets were a harsh reminder of the life he had lost. Ethan wasn't just another face in the crowd. His piercing blue eyes and rugged features told a story of resilience, though his circumstances painted a different picture. One fateful evening, as he sat outside a diner watching people pass by, a well-dressed stranger offered him a meal. "You have potential," the man said after hearing Ethan's story. His name was Khalid al-Rashid, a successful Arab entrepreneur who saw something in Ethan that others overlooked: determination. Khalid offered Ethan a chance to rebuild his life, inviting him to Dubai to work at a small startup Khalid was mentoring. Ethan, with nothing to lose, took the leap. Arriving in Dubai felt like stepping into another world. The skyscrapers, luxury cars, and bustling energy of the city overwhelmed him. Ethan worked tirelessly, proving his worth in ways Khalid hadn't anticipated. His ability to adapt, learn quickly, and think outside the box earned him the trust and admiration of everyone around him. Over the years, Ethan rose through the ranks, eventually becoming Khalid's right-hand man. But Ethan's journey was far from over. Khalid, nearing retirement, surprised everyone by naming Ethan his successor. Now Ethan, rebranded as Ehsan al-Malik to honor the culture that had embraced him, was one of the most powerful and influential executives in Dubai. His transformation from a homeless man to an Arab billionaire executive was the talk of the business world. As his fortune grew, Ethan reached out to the one person who had stood by him during his darkest days, Amara, his African-American wife. Back in Detroit, she had shared the little she had with him, supporting him even when he felt unworthy of love. But things had changed. When Ethan sent for Amara, the reunion was not what he expected. Amara had grown resentful, dismissing his success as mere luck and belittling his achievements. "Money doesn't make you better than anyone," she said with a bitterness that cut deeper than Ethan cared to admit. The chapter ends with Ethan staring at the Dubai skyline from his penthouse, his mind racing. He had given her everything, his heart, his loyalty, and now the life she had always deserved. But her rejection of his transformation stung deeply. The question lingered. Could he forgive her ingratitude, or would he let go of the past to embrace his new life fully? Ethan, now Ehsan al-Malik, could not shake the sting of Amara's words. He had spent years dreaming of the moment he could bring her to Dubai, to show her the life he had built from nothing. He had imagined her pride, her joy, and the gratitude they would share for overcoming life's hardships together. But instead, her sharp words echoed in his mind. "Money doesn't make you better than anyone." Amara arrived in Dubai a month after Ethan sent for her. He had arranged for the best: first-class tickets, a luxury suite at one of his hotels, and a chauffeured car to take her anywhere she wanted. But from the moment she stepped off the plane, her demeanor was distant. Ethan met her at the airport, his arms open wide, but she greeted him with a polite hug that lacked the warmth he remembered. "You've certainly done well for yourself," she said, her tone neutral, almost cold. The drive to his penthouse was quiet. Ethan tried to bridge the silence, pointing out the marvels of Dubai, the Burj Khalifa piercing the clouds, the shimmering waters of the Arabian Gulf, and the bustling energy of the city. Amara nodded, but said little. Ethan's heart sank as he realized that the woman sitting beside him felt like a stranger. Over the next week, the tension between them grew. Ethan tried to reconnect with her, taking her to the finest restaurants, showing her the office where he ran his multi-billion-dollar empire, and even arranging a private yacht tour. But nothing seemed to impress Amara. "It's all very beautiful," she said once, gazing out at the skyline. "But is this what you think happiness looks like?" Her words hit Ethan like a blow. He began to notice the subtle ways she belittled his success. When they dined with his colleagues, she would make comments that downplayed his achievements. "Ethan always had big dreams, but he's lucky Khalid gave him a chance," she said at one dinner, her smile sweet, but her words cutting. His colleagues exchanged awkward glances, unsure of how to respond. Ethan tried to understand her resentment. He knew their past had been hard, living on the streets, sharing meals out of trash cans and fighting to survive. But he thought their struggles had bound them together. Now it seemed that his success had become a wedge between them. He began to question whether her bitterness was rooted in jealousy, insecurity, or something deeper. One evening, after yet another strained dinner, Ethan confronted her. "Why are you doing this, Amara?" he asked, his voice heavy with frustration. "I thought bringing you here would make us stronger, that you'd be proud of how far we've come." Amara didn't look at him. Instead, she stared out the massive window of his penthouse, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "You've changed, Ethan," she said softly. "You're not the man I fell in love with. Back then, you were humble. Now, all of this. It's like you're trying to prove something." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I worked for this, Amara. Every bit of it. And I wanted to share it with you because you're the one person I thought would understand." She turned to face him then, her expression a mixture of sadness and defiance. "Maybe I don't understand. Maybe I don't belong in this world of yours." The words hung in the air, a painful truth neither of them wanted to admit. Ethan walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. As he stood on the balcony, the weight of their crumbling marriage bore down on him. He had climbed to the top of the world, but it felt emptier than ever. The chapter ends with Ethan making a decision. If she can't see what I've built, maybe I need to show her what she's lost, he muttered to himself. His voice was firm, his mind made up. The morning sun rose over Dubai's gleaming skyline. But inside Ethan's penthouse, the atmosphere was colder than the desert night. Ethan stood by the window, staring down at the bustling streets below. His phone was pressed to his ear as he spoke in a tone that was calm, but laced with purpose. "I need everything arranged by tonight," he said to his assistant. "No questions. Just follow the instructions." Amara stirred in the guest suite down the hall. She had chosen not to share Ethan's room since arriving, claiming she needed time to adjust. Ethan had said nothing at the time, but now it felt like yet another rejection. As he heard her footsteps approach, he straightened his posture, his expression hardening. "Good morning," Amara said, her voice distant as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "Good morning," Ethan replied, his tone neutral. For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of the coffee machine. Amara sipped her drink and glanced at him. "You're awfully quiet today. What's on your mind?" Ethan turned to face her, his blue eyes piercing. "I've been thinking about us," he said, his voice steady. "About how we got here and what's gone wrong." Amara raised an eyebrow, her expression wary. "And what conclusion have you come to?" "That maybe I've been too generous," he said bluntly, "too willing to overlook the fact that the person I thought I could trust most seems determined to tear me down at every turn." Amara set her cup down, her jaw tightening. "Generous? You think throwing money at me and parading me around your world is generosity? You've lost touch with who you are, Ethan." "No, Amara," he said, his voice firm. "I've found who I am. And it seems you don't like it because it makes you uncomfortable." The tension in the room was palpable. Before Amara could respond, Ethan stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You said I've changed, and maybe I have. But I worked for this life, every single piece of it. And if you can't appreciate that, then maybe it's time for you to go." Amara's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I arranged a flight for you," he said. "Back to Detroit. There's a car waiting downstairs to take you to the airport. All your things are packed." For a moment, Amara was speechless. She searched his face for any hint of hesitation, but there was none. "You're kicking me out?" Ethan crossed his arms, his expression unyielding. "I'm giving you a choice. If you can't respect the man I've become, then you're free to leave. But if you stay, you need to decide whether you're willing to stand by me or not." Amara's hands trembled as she processed his words. "This isn't the man I married," she said, her voice shaking. "No," Ethan replied. "This is the man who survived, the man who fought his way out of the gutter while you stood on the sidelines and judged him." Amara's face flushed with anger. "You think you're better than me now? Just because you have money? You've forgotten where you came from, Ethan." Ethan shook his head. "No, I haven't. But I refuse to let anyone, including you, drag me back there." The sound of a car horn echoed from the street below, signaling that her ride had arrived. Amara's heart raced as she realized he was serious. She grabbed her purse and walked to the door, pausing for a moment to look back at him. "You think you're teaching me a lesson," she said, her voice cold. "But one day, you'll realize that all of this, your money, your power, means nothing without love." Ethan didn't respond as she walked out the door, the sound of it closing behind her reverberating through the empty penthouse. As the car drove away, Ethan stood by the window, watching her leave. His chest was heavy with conflicting emotions, relief, anger, and a deep sadness he couldn't shake. The silence in Ethan's penthouse was deafening that evening. He sat on the edge of his sleek leather couch, staring at the untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. The decision to send Amara away had left an ache in his chest that he didn't want to admit. She had been a part of his life's darkest chapter. And now, in the light of his success, she was gone. Just as he was about to retreat to his room, his phone buzzed on the table. The name on the screen made his stomach drop. Amara. He hesitated for a moment, his thumb hovering over the answer button before finally picking up. Her voice on the other end was trembling. "Ethan. I mean, Ehsan. She stopped, her words catching in her throat. "What is it, Amara?" he asked, his tone colder than he intended. "I didn't know who else to call," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't make it to the airport. Someone Someone followed me. I think they're trying to hurt me." Ethan shot up from the couch, his heart racing. "Where are you?" "I'm at a cafe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to go back to Detroit yet. I thought maybe I'd find a way to stay." Ethan's mind raced as he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "Stay there. Don't move. I'm coming to get you." The drive to the cafe felt like an eternity, though it was only 10 minutes away. When he arrived, he spotted Amara sitting at a corner table, her hands clutching a cup of tea. Her face was pale, her usual confidence replaced with fear. Ethan approached her quickly, his presence commanding. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning the room for any sign of danger. Amara nodded but didn't meet his eyes. "I think they left, but I've been feeling like someone's been watching me since I left the penthouse." Ethan sat down across from her, his gaze sharp. "Did you see who it was? Did they say anything to you?" She shook her head. "No, but I can't shake the feeling that this isn't random." Ethan clenched his jaw, his protective instincts kicking in. Over the years, he had made his share of enemies in the business world, people who envied his rise to power or resented his success, but he hadn't considered that his personal life might become collateral damage. "Let's go," he said firmly, standing up and offering her his hand. "You're coming back to the penthouse. I'll make sure you're safe." Amara hesitated, looking up at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Why are you doing this? You were ready to let me go this morning." Ethan's expression softened for the first time that day. "Because no matter what's happened between us, I won't let anyone hurt you. Not while I'm here." They returned to the penthouse in silence, the weight of the situation hanging heavy between them. Ethan immediately called his head of security, issuing orders to investigate the incident and tighten security around the building. "I want answers by tomorrow morning," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. That night, as Amara sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, Ethan handed her a cup of tea. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I didn't mean what I said earlier," she admitted quietly. "About you changing. I was angry, but the truth is, I don't know how to fit into your world anymore." Ethan sat beside her, the distance between them smaller now. "I didn't expect you to," he said, "but I hoped we could figure it out together." Her lips trembled as she nodded. "I'm sorry, Ethan, for everything. I didn't want to lose you, and I didn't know how to say it." For the first time in weeks, the tension between them eased. Ethan placed a hand on hers, his touch gentle. "We've been through too much to let this break us," he said softly. "But we need to rebuild, on trust, not resentment." Their moment was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Ethan's muscles tensed as he stood up, motioning for Amara to stay back. When he opened the door, his head of security stood there, his expression grim. "Mr. Al-Malik," he said, his voice low. "We've found out who's been following Mrs. Amara, and you're not going to like it." Ethan's grip on the doorframe tightened as his head of security, Omar, stepped into the room. His normally composed demeanor faltered as he delivered the news. "It's someone from your past, Mr. Al-Malik. A man named Farid Khan. He's been in Dubai for weeks, and we believe he's the one behind this." Ethan's stomach dropped at the mention of Farid's name. Farid had been Khalid's protege before Ethan, a cunning, ambitious man who had been cast aside for his ruthless behavior. Ethan had heard whispers that Farid blamed him for his fall from grace, but he never imagined the grudge would escalate to this level. "Fareed," Ethan muttered, his voice laced with both anger and disbelief. "I haven't seen him in years. Why now?" Omar handed Ethan a file containing surveillance photos and reports. "We believe he's targeting you as revenge for his ruined career. But it's not just about you, sir. He's been watching Mrs. Amara since she arrived." Amara, who had been sitting on the couch, stood up, her face pale. "He's been watching me?" she whispered. Ethan turned to her, his expression hardening with resolve. "He's trying to get to me by going after you, but I won't let him succeed." The weight of the situation pressed down on Ethan as he paced the room. Fareed's actions were not only a personal attack, but a calculated move to dismantle everything Ethan had built. He knew Fareed well enough to understand that this was only the beginning. "Have you found his location?" Ethan asked Omar, his voice cold and commanding. Omar nodded. "He's been staying at a hotel in the business district. We've already assigned a team to monitor him." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Good. I want every move he makes tracked, and I want to send him a message." "Understood, sir," Omar said, bowing slightly before leaving the room. As the door closed, Ethan turned to Amara, who was still visibly shaken. He walked over to her, his gaze softening. "You're safe now," he said gently. "I won't let him come near you again." Amara looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't understand why someone would hate you this much, Ethan. All you've ever done is try to move forward." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "When you rise, you make enemies. Some people can't handle seeing someone else succeed, especially when they feel it should have been them." Amara nodded, her hands trembling as she clutched the blanket around her. "What if he doesn't stop? What if he comes after us again?" Ethan placed his hands on her shoulders, his grip firm but reassuring. "Then I'll deal with him. I've faced worse than Fareed before, and I'm not afraid of him." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his office, staring at the surveillance photos of Fareed. Memories of their time under Khalid's mentorship flooded his mind. Fareed's arrogance, his manipulative tactics, and the way he had tried to undermine Ethan at every turn. Khalid had seen through Fareed's facade, choosing Ethan as his successor instead. Fareed's rage had been palpable, but Ethan had assumed he would eventually move on. Now, it was clear that Fareed had spent years nursing his bitterness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Ethan knew he had to act decisively, not just to protect himself, but to ensure Amara's safety. The next morning, Ethan received a call from Omar. "Fareed left his hotel early this morning, heading toward the industrial district. We have a team following him." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What's he doing there?" "We're not sure yet, but it looks like he's meeting with someone," Omar replied. Ethan made a decision. "I'm coming down there. Send me the location." "Are you sure, sir?" Omar asked, his tone cautious. "I'm sure," Ethan said firmly. "This ends today." He told Amara to stay in the penthouse and left with his security team. The drive to the industrial district was tense, the weight of what lay ahead heavy on Ethan's shoulders. When they arrived, Ethan spotted Fareed standing near an abandoned warehouse, talking to a man Ethan didn't recognize. He stepped out of the car, his presence commanding as he approached. Fareed turned, a smirk spreading across his face. "Well, well," Fareed said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "The great Ehsan al-Malik. I was wondering when you'd show up." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You've crossed a line, Fareed. Whatever grudge you have with me, it ends now." Fareed laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You think you can just walk in here and intimidate me? You took everything from me, Ethan. My career, my reputation, my life. And now, I'm going to take something from you. Ethan's fists clenched, his voice steady but filled with warning. You've already lost, Farid. Walk away while you still can. Farid's smirk faltered for a moment, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. This isn't over, Ethan. Not by a long shot. Ethan stood in the shadows of the abandoned warehouse, watching Farid retreat with a smugness that sent a chill down his spine. Something about Farid's demeanor told him this was far from over. The man had made his intentions clear. This wasn't just personal, it was war. And Ethan knew that in war, hesitation could cost everything. Omar stepped forward, his hand resting on the firearm holstered at his side. We should move now, sir. He's vulnerable and we have the upper hand. But Ethan shook his head, his jaw set in determination. No, I want to know exactly what he's planning before we act. If we strike now, we might miss the bigger picture. I need to protect Amara and everything I've built. As they returned to the car, Omar handed Ethan a small device. We planted a tracker on Farid's car. Wherever he goes next, we'll know. Back at the penthouse, Ethan found Amara pacing in the living room, her anxiety written all over her face. When he walked in, she rushed to him. What happened? Did you find him? Ethan nodded, his expression calm but guarded. We found him. But this isn't over yet. He's planning something, and I need to make sure we're ready. Amara's eyes filled with worry. What if he tries to hurt you? Or me? Ethan, I don't think I can handle this. He took her hands in his grip firm but gentle. Listen to me. I won't let anything happen to you. You're safe here, and I've got the best security team in the city watching over us. But I need you to trust me. Amara searched his face, her fear softening into reluctant trust. I do trust you. I'm scared. I know, Ethan said, his voice softening. But I promise, this ends soon. The next morning, Omar called with an update. Farid's tracker shows he's headed to the outskirts of the city, near the desert. There's an old estate there. Rumor has it, he's been using it as a base. Ethan's mind raced. The desert estate was a perfect hideout, isolated, secure, and far from prying eyes. If Farid was planning something, that's where he'd be putting it in motion. Get the team ready, Ethan said. We're going there tonight. As dusk fell, Ethan and his security team drove out to the estate. The drive was tense, the vast emptiness of the desert stretching around them like a silent witness to what was about to unfold. When they arrived, the estate loomed in the distance, its shadowy silhouette stark against the fading light. Ethan surveyed the scene through binoculars. The estate was heavily guarded, with men patrolling the perimeter and vehicles parked near the entrance. Farid wasn't taking any chances. Omar leaned in. How do you want to handle this, sir? Ethan considered his options. A full-scale confrontation could escalate quickly, putting everyone at risk. But waiting too long could give Farid more time to execute whatever he was planning. Finally, Ethan made his decision. We'll infiltrate quietly, he said. I want to get to Farid before his men even realize we're here. Under the cover of darkness, Ethan and his team approached the estate. Moving swiftly and silently, they neutralized the guards at the perimeter, making their way inside. The tension was palpable, every shadow and sound heightening their alertness. Inside the estate, Ethan found Farid in a dimly lit room, standing over a table covered with blueprints and documents. Farid looked up, startled, but quickly masked his surprise with a sneer. Well, well, Farid said, his voice dripping with disdain. You just couldn't stay away, could you? Ethan stepped forward, his eyes cold and unyielding. It's over, Farid. Whatever you're planning, it stops now. Farid chuckled, shaking his head. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about you, Ethan. It's about justice. Khalid should have chosen me, but he picked you. A nobody. You don't deserve the life you've built. Ethan's voice was steady, but filled with conviction. You're wrong, Farid. I earned everything I have, and your obsession with revenge has blinded you to the truth. You've already lost. Farid's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered, pulling out a phone and holding it up. You think you've won? Think again. With one call, I can destroy everything you care about. Ethan's pulse quickened, but he didn't let it show. Do it, and I'll make sure you never walk out of this room. For a moment, the two men stared each other down, the room crackling with tension. Then, in a sudden move, Farid pressed the phone's screen. The blaring alarm echoed through the estate, drowning out every other sound. Within seconds, Farid's men stormed into the room, their weapons raised and their faces grim. Ethan's team moved into position, their guns drawn, ready for the inevitable standoff. Farid stood in the middle of the chaos, a triumphant smirk plastered across his face. You underestimated me, Ethan, he sneered. You thought you could walk in here and take me down? This is my game, and you just lost. Ethan's heart pounded, but his expression remained calm. He had faced life-or-death situations before, and he wasn't about to let Farid see him break. Slowly, he raised his hands, signaling for his team to hold their fire. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed, Farid, he said, his voice steady. You want justice? Let's talk about it. But this won't bring you peace. Farid's eyes flickered with uncertainty for a brief moment before he masked it with anger. Peace. Don't lecture me about peace. You stole everything from me, Ethan. My career, my legacy, my life. You don't get to offer me peace now. The tension in the room was suffocating. Farid's men tightened their grip on their weapons, waiting for their leader's command. Ethan's team stood firm, their eyes locked on their targets. It was a powder keg waiting to explode. Ethan took a step forward, his gaze locked on Farid. You're right about one thing, he said. I've made mistakes. But this isn't just about me. You've dragged innocent people into this. Amara, my team, even your own men. They don't deserve to pay for your obsession. Farid's smirk faltered, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. You think you can manipulate me with your words, he spat. I'm not some fool you can charm. I'm not trying to manipulate you, Ethan said, his tone earnest. I'm trying to end this before it's too late. Look around you, Farid. Is this really the legacy you want to leave behind? A man so consumed by revenge that he destroys everything in his path. For a moment, silence filled the room. Farid's men exchanged uncertain glances, their confidence wavering. Ethan's words had struck a chord, and even Farid couldn't deny the truth in them. But the bitterness in his heart was too deep, too consuming. Farid's hand trembled as he held the phone, his finger hovering over another button. You don't get to judge me, Ethan, he said, his voice shaking. This is the only way to make things right. Before he could press the button, Omar stepped forward, his gun trained on Farid. Put it down, he commanded. You've lost. The room erupted into chaos. Farid's men opened fire, and Ethan's team retaliated. The sound of gunshots echoed through the estate as the two sides clashed. Ethan ducked behind a table, his mind racing as he tried to find a way to end the fight without further bloodshed. Amid the chaos, Ethan spotted Farid making a break for the door. Without hesitation, he chased after him, dodging bullets and weaving through the commotion. The two men burst out into the desert night, the cool air biting against their skin. Farid ran toward a waiting SUV, but Ethan tackled him to the ground before he could reach it. The two men grappled in the sand, their anger and frustration boiling over. Farid swung wildly, his fists fueled by years of resentment, but Ethan fought with precision, his movements calculated. "You don't have to do this, Farid," Ethan said between breaths. "It's over." "It's never over," Farid shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "You don't understand what it's like to lose everything." Ethan pinned Farid to the ground, his strength overpowering him. "You're right. I don't. But you still have a chance to rebuild, if you let go of this hate." Farid's body went limp, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. For the first time, tears welled in his eyes. I wanted to matter," he whispered. "You do," Ethan said, his voice softer now. "But not like this." The sound of sirens in the distance signaled the arrival of the authorities. Omar and the rest of Ethan's team emerged from the estate, rounding up Farid's men. As the police took Farid into custody, he cast one last look at Ethan, his expression a mix of defeat and reluctant respect. Back at the penthouse, Ethan found Amara waiting for him, her face etched with worry. When he walked through the door, she ran to him, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "It's over," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Farid's gone." Amara pulled back, her eyes searching his. "And us? Are we over too?" Ethan looked at her, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on him. "We've been through a lot," he said, "but I think we can find our way back, if we're willing to fight for it." Amara nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. "I'm willing." If this story inspired you, remember, resilience and forgiveness can overcome even the deepest wounds. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who loves powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching.